Alright, what's going on, guys? EGM coming at you with a brand new video, and today I'm going to be bringing you my predictions for UFC on Fox 25 Gastelum versus Weidman. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so as usual, we're going to be starting off with the early prelims on UFC Fight Pass. So for the first fight, we got a lightweight bout between Frankie Perez and Chris Wade. I got Chris Wade winning via unanimous decision. Next up, we have a featherweight bout between Shane Burgos and Godofredo Pepey. Shane Burgos is currently undefeated, 9-0. Godofredo Pepey has won 4 of his last 5 fights. He's a good submission specialist, so I'm going to have to go with Godofredo Pepey by second round submission. Next up, we have a heavyweight bout between the number 12th ranked heavyweight contender Timothy Johnson and UFC newcomer Junior Albini. I have Timothy Johnson winning by unanimous decision. Next up, we have a bantamweight bout between Brian Kelleher, who is on a 7-fight win streak, versus Marlon Vera, who is on a 2-fight win streak. I think Marlon Vera will use his size and his reach advantage and come away with the unanimous decision victory. Next up, we have a featherweight bout between Kyle Bochniak and Jeremy Kennedy. Kyle Bochniak currently 7-1, 1-1 in the UFC. Jeremy Kennedy currently undefeated, 2-0 in the UFC. He's solid all around. I like Jeremy Kennedy, and I think he's going to come away with a unanimous decision victory. Next up, we have a heavyweight bout between Damian, Grabowski, and Chase Sherman. Damian Grabowski is a very solid fighter all around. Likes to wrestle, take the fight down to the ground, utilizes ground and pound. Chase Sherman, 90% of his wins come by knockout, so he's a headhunter. He's very sloppy on the feet. And I see Damian Grabowski taking him down early, keeping him down, and getting the second round TKO finish. Next up, we have a welterweight bout between the 13th ranked welterweight in the world, Ryan Laflare, and Alex Cowboy Oleveira. Ryan Laflare currently has a record of 11-1. The only blemish on that record comes to current number 1 contender Damian Maia. He hasn't really faced any stiff competition. The best win on his resume is probably Santiago Ponzinibbio, but he's a solid boxer. He's a really good wrestler, pretty good on the ground. Cowboy Oliveira, on the other hand, is 16-3, 10 knockouts, coming off a beautiful submission victory over Tim Means. You know, he's beating guys like Will Brooks. He's on a 3-fight win streak. You know, he's long, he's rangy, he's excellent when it comes to Muay Thai. He's really good on the ground. He's also an all-around fighter. I think Cowboy Oliveira is going to come in. He's going to use the distance. He's going to use his reach, and I think he's going to come away with a second-round TKO. Next up, we have a middleweight bout between Rafael Natal and UFC newcomer Eryk. Anderson is undefeated. He's a solid wrestler. He's a pretty good boxer. Other than that, I don't know too much about him. But Rafael Natal's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Has a record of 21-8. 8 of his wins come by submission. But Natal is currently coming off a 2-fight losing streak to Tim Boetsch, who's as tough as they come in the middleweight division, and to Robert Whittaker, who is the current interim middleweight champion of the world. So by no means has he lost to inferior opponents. But I just see Eryk Anders as a younger, hungrier fighter. But because he's young and he's hungry, he's going to have the I have to prove something mentality. I think he's going to make a silly mistake, and Rafael Natal is going to capitalize because he's a veteran, and he's going to come away with his second round submission victory. Next up, we have a welterweight bout between Lyman Good and Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. I have Lyman Good coming away with the first round technical knockout. And now we move on to the main card. First up, we have a bantamweight bout between Jimmy Rivera and Thomas Almeida. Thomas Almeida is currently ranked number 9 in that bantamweight division, holds a record of 22-1. The only loss on that record coming to current bantamweight champ Cody Garbrandt. He has 17 knockouts and is a very exciting fighter to watch. He's a black belt in Muay Thai, a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's very creative with his striking. He likes to use his elbows, likes to use his knees. He has really good power in his hands. Creative with his striking, but he's accurate, and he can finish you in a variety of different ways. Now, the very first time he was tested against veteran Brad Pickett actually wobbled him on the feet, was very close to putting him away. Almeida came back and knocked him out with a beautiful knee and slept Brad Pickett. Now, Brad Pickett, that's the best win that he's had. Now, when he faced Cody Garbrandt was just too fast. His boxing was just way too crisp, way too clean, and he slept Thomas Almeida in the first round. So because he's a bit too wild, he is vulnerable to getting hit. Outside of those 2 names, he hasn't really stepped in there with any other stiff competition. The last time he stepped into the octagon, he TKO'd Albert Morales. Now this time he's facing the number 5 ranked contender in the world, Jimmy Rivera. Now Jimmy Rivera has a record of 20-1. He's a black belt in Tiger Schumann MMA, which is a karate named after Tiger Schumann. He's 4-0 in the UFC. He's on a 19-fight win streak. The last time he stepped into the octagon, he obliterated Uriah Faber, beat him by unanimous decision, which is way too strong for him. Utilized beautiful leg kicks, but he's a very technical striker. He's very strong in wrestling, and he's a very strong grappler. Now, the only flaw for Jimmy is his size. He only stands at 5'4". And like Thomas Almeida, he doesn't really have any solid wins on his resume. Now, if Jimmy Rivera wants to win this fight, he's going to have to pressure. He's going to have to stay on top of Thomas Almeida right off the bat and attack early and often. Now, he cannot give Thomas Almeida space because Thomas Almeida thrives in space. It's going to give Thomas Almeida opportunities to utilize his superior striking. Now, Thomas Almeida, if he wants to win, he's going to have to pick his shots. He's going to have to stay calm under Jimmy Rivera's pressure and let Jimmy Rivera be the aggressor and make him pay with his solid counter striking. And because of that, I do see Thomas Almeida utilizing his reach and being able to finish Jimmy Rivera in the third round via TKO. Next up, we have a light heavyweight matchup between Gian Villante, who is currently ranked number 13 in the light heavyweight division, and Patrick Cummins, who is currently ranked 11 in the light heavyweight division. Gian Villante currently has a record of 15-7. 10 of his wins come by knockout. He's a really good boxer. He's a strong wrestler, and he has tremendous power in both of his hands now. He doesn't really have the best defense. His movement isn't too good. He tends to get hit a lot. You know, in his last fight with Shogun Rua, I actually picked him to win. I thought he would be the stronger fighter. I thought he would be way too big for Shogun Rua and land one of those bombs, but it didn't go down that way. It was Shogun Rua who was actually landing the bombs, who actually outstruck Gian Villante and put him away via technical knockout, I believe it was. Now, on the other hand, we have Patrick Cummins. Patrick Cummins is a former Division I college wrestler. Currently has a record of 9-4. Almost half of his wins come by knockout. But he's 5-4 in the UFC. Now, he was on a 2-fight losing streak to Little Nog and Glover Teixeira before he finally got back in the win column against Jan Blachowicz. Now, his losses do include, as I said, Little Nog, OSP, Glover Teixeira, and Daniel Cormier. So, by no means has he lost to scrubs. You know, he's lost to solid competition. Now, he does have a good gas tank. He always comes in shape. He's a really strong wrestler. He has really good takedown defense. He's defended 70% of the takedowns that have been attempted on him. Now, the weaknesses, he does not have a chin. All 4 of his losses, he's been knocked out. Now, with Gian Villante, you have to be careful because even though Gian Villante is a sloppy striker, he has power. And it only takes one for Gian Villante to catch you and knock you out. Now, this is a very, very difficult fight to pick. Not necessarily because of the level of competition, because these guys are elite fighters. I think this is a very hard fight to pick because they're both very sloppy. And it's just going to come down who makes less mistakes because they both make mistakes every time they fight. Now, I personally think that Gian Villante is going to come in a little bit more prepared. He's going to come in, he's going to outbox Patrick Cummins. Now, Cummins is going to come in with the game plan of taking Gian Villante down, but I think it's going to be pretty difficult. I think he's going to shoot a few times early. I think Gian Villante is going to stuff those, and Patrick Cummins is going to have no choice but to stand up with Gian Villante. Now, don't get me wrong, they both have an equal chance of knocking each other out. Now, it's going to come down to who lands the right shot on the right spot at the right time, or who makes the first mistake. Now, I do see that person being Patrick Cummins. Now, this really is a toss-up, and it could be anyone's fight, but I just think that Gian Villante is going to be too strong. I think his boxing is a bit better than Patrick Cummins, and he's going to land that shot. I think he's going to hurt Patrick Cummins early. I think he'll knock him down once, maybe twice in the first round, because I do see Gian Villante coming off right off the bat and swinging for the fences. I do see Patrick Cummins coming back in the second round, showing a little bit of fight in him, landing a few good shots, but eventually Gian Villante is going to land that shot that sleeps him in the second round. And now we move on to the co-main event of the evening. A featherweight bout between the number 10th ranked featherweight in the world, Dennis Bermudez, and the number 11th ranked featherweight in the world, Darren Elkins. Dennis Bermudez is a solid striker. He's a former Division I college wrestler. He has a record of 17-6. He only has 4 knockouts and 4 submissions. The rest of his wins come by decision. He's won 9 of his last 12 fights. The last time he stepped in to fight, he fought Chang Sung-jung, the Korean Zombie. Now, he actually wobbled Chang Sung-jung in that fight. He caught him with a clean overhand. Chang Sung-jung seemed to be wobbled, but the Korean Zombie is known for his resiliency, his ability to eat a punch, and he slept Dennis Bermudez with a beautiful right-hand uppercut. Now, Dennis Bermudez, as I said, he's a strong wrestler. He likes to utilize his ground and pound. He's very fast, and he has a powerful left hand. But when it comes to stand-up, he does have a tendency to leave himself open, and he doesn't really do a good job of pacing himself. Now, he's going up against Darren Elkins, who's a strong grappler. He has a record of 23-5. 8 of his wins come by knockout. A majority of his wins do come by decision. He's on a 4-fight win streak. His last fight was a ridiculous come-from-behind victory against Mirsad Bektic. Bektic was absolutely dominating him, taking him down, beating him up on the ground, bloody Darren Elkins up. When in the third round, he had Mirsad Bektic against the cage, landed a few punches. Bektic was wobbled. He landed a kick and eventually finished him. It was one of the most amazing moments in UFC history. You know, it was just a beautiful display of heart and desire to win. Now, he's beaten guys, as I said, Mirsad Bektic, Chaz Skelly, but he has lost to guys like Jeremy Stevens, Chad Mendes, Charles Oliveira. So both of these guys are still looking to make a name for themselves in this division and establish themselves as legit contenders. If Dennis Bermudez wants to win this fight, he's going to have to use his hand speed. He's going to have to show that he is the much faster fighter, and he's going to have to utilize his superior footwork. I expect Dennis Bermudez to come in with a sort of Frankie Edgar-like approach where he comes in, throws a few combinations, and comes out, because Darren Elkins is the bigger fighter. He is the stronger fighter. He's 4 inches taller and he has a 5-inch reach advantage. So I do expect Darren Elkins to use his jab and tap Dennis Bermudez up at a distance, because Dennis Bermudez is smaller. But I just think that Darren Elkins takes way too many punches, and Dennis Bermudez is going to land a shot that puts him away in the second round. And now we move on to the main event of the evening. A bout between the 5th ranked middleweight contender in the world, Chris the All-American Weidman, and Kelvin Gastelum. Now, Chris Weidman is a former champion at that weight division. He's a strong wrestler, a former Division I college wrestler, a great Muay Thai fighter, excellent in the clinch, and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, he has a record of 13-3. He's 9-3 in the UFC and is currently on a 3-fight losing streak. Now, it all began when he lost his belt to Luke Rockhold. He then went on to fight Yoel Romero at UFC 205, where he was obliterated by a flying knee in the third round. His last fight was against Gegard Mousasi at UFC 210. Now, there was a bit of controversy surrounding that fight. Gegard Mousasi did land multiple knees to Chris Weidman's head. They thought that Chris Weidman was a down opponent because he had both his hands on the mat. Weidman claimed and acted as if he couldn't continue. Replay showed that the knees were actually legal, so they awarded Gegard Mousasi the TKO victory. But this is a guy that at one time was on top of the middleweight division. He dethroned the greatest of all time, in my opinion, Anderson Silva, beat him twice. He beat Damian Maia, Lyoto Machida, Vitor Belfort, Mark Munoz. He defended his belt multiple times. He's a strong wrestler. He's very strong in general. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as I mentioned previously. Strong knees and elbows, and he's very athletic. Now, his weaknesses may be his boxing. He's not the best boxer in that division. He's not too fast with his hands, with his movement, basic striking, and right now one of his major flaws is his confidence. Chris Weidman is trying to find himself. He's trying to find if he still belongs, not just in the UFC, but if he can still compete with the top guys. Now, on the other hand, he's taking on an opponent that is one of the hottest fighters in that division. He's going up against Kelvin Gastelum, who was previously ranked inside the top 10. You know, he fought at welterweight, missed weight a few times. He was scheduled to fight Donald Cerrone at UFC 205. Missed weight for that fight before they told him that he should just move up. It was best that he moved up. Made his UFC debut against Tim Kennedy, where he knocked him out in a beautiful display of boxing. Now, Kelvin Gastelum is currently on a 2-fight win streak. He beat Johnny Hendricks in his last fight at welterweight in UFC 200, and he won his middleweight debut against Tim Kennedy. Now, he's technically on a 3-fight win streak. Now, I say technically because in his last fight, he absolutely demolished Vitor Belfort in the first round. He knocked him out, pieced him up badly. But that fight was actually overturned because drug testing discovered weed in his system. So therefore, he lost his ranking in the middleweight division. But he is one of the better fighters in this division, and he is on fire right now. He won the Ultimate Fighter Season 17. As I said, he's beaten Tim Kennedy, he's beaten Uriah Hall, Johnny Hendricks, Jake Ellenberger, Rick Story, Nate Marquardt. He's one of the best boxers in that division by far. He has really good defense. He's a strong wrestler. Trains Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Eddie Bravo at 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, one of the better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coaches out there. Now, his only 2 losses are against Tyron Woodley, who is the current welterweight champion of the world, and Neil Magny, but both of those fights were split decisions. That means that one judge had Kelvin Gastelum winning the fight. So that just goes to show that Kelvin Gastelum has never been dominated. He has never been beaten clearly. And that's what makes Kelvin Gastelum so great, is his intelligence. He game plans so well for different opponents. Now this is a very interesting matchup because, as I said, Chris Weidman's confidence is at an all-time low and Kelvin Gastelum's confidence is at an all-time high. Now the height advantage, or the height difference and size difference, is vast in this fight. Although they both come in weighing in at 185 pounds, they have to make that weight to be eligible to fight. Now, in order for Chris Weidman to win this fight, he's going to have to use his wrestling. Obviously, he's one of the best wrestlers, not just in that division, but in the entire UFC. So Weidman's got to come out, he's got to use his wrestling, but he has to set it up. He has to set it up with some striking combinations, maybe throw some kicks in there, maybe engage in the clinch, and make Kelvin Gastelum feel his power and make Kelvin Gastelum hesitate in wanting to exchange with him. But he has to set up the takedowns. As I said, he can't shoot for weak takedowns. He did that against Yoel Romero, and Yoel Romero made him pay. Now, for Kelvin Gastelum to win this fight, obviously he has to use his striking. He's one of the best boxers in that division. I would put my money on him as the best boxer in that division, right up there with Robert Whittaker. But he has to use his boxing, he has to use his hand speed, he has to throw a variety of different combinations, and he usually does a good job of doing that. Now, Chris Weidman, as I said, is going to try to take him down, but I do see Kelvin Gastelum doing a solid job of stuffing a majority of those takedowns. I wouldn't doubt that Chris Weidman does get him to the canvas a few times, but it's about whether or not Chris Weidman can hold him down. Kelvin Gastelum is really good in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's not as high a ranking as Chris Weidman in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he can hold his own on the mat. Now, if at any point in this fight, the fight is standing on the feet for more than 3 minutes, at any point in the fight, Chris Weidman will lose this fight. Chris Weidman has to keep Kelvin Gastelum on his toes. He has to get in Kelvin Gastelum's face. He cannot allow any space for Kelvin Gastelum to work. He has to pressure him and make Kelvin Gastelum back up the whole fight. He has to make Kelvin Gastelum fight with his back against the cage, because as we know, a boxer is no good if he doesn't have space to work. Now, I just don't see that happening. Now, for my prediction, I see the fight going down this way. I see Chris Weidman coming out early. I see him throwing a few combinations. I see him tagging Kelvin Gastelum, not because Chris Weidman is the better boxer. Obviously, he's not. But I think he's going to tag Kelvin Gastelum a few times early in the fight, because Kelvin Gastelum is going to have to adjust to that reach advantage that Chris Weidman has. So I do see him landing a few shots, shooting for a takedown early, getting Kelvin Gastelum down, holding him down for the rest of the round, not really doing much with it. In the second round, I do see Chris Weidman trying to repeat the same thing, throw a few combinations, shoot for takedowns, and Kelvin Gastelum stuffing the rest of his takedowns. And then the fight's going to be left standing up. Kelvin Gastelum is so fast with his hands. He throws so many different punch combos in so little time. He's just so fast and so explosive, and it's just so good at using different angles and so smooth with his technique. And I do see him being too much for Chris Weidman on the feet and knocking him out in the third round. Now, if you enjoy these predictions, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Thanks, guys.